one type of student that I always ran into was the vampire student. Fam, so happy whatever day it is for you watching or listening to this. I figured for our first official run at this and me flopping over myself and messing up my words, we would just give it a shot and talk about something that it ended up being a real big issue when I was teaching. And this happened throughout all the years I taught. I taught students that were 3 months away from graduation. I also taught students that were 3 months into their college education. So I ran the gambit in regards to the level of experience of student, from the new amateur student to the professional nearly graduated student. And one type of student that I always ran into was the vampire student. Now, when I say vampire student, I can imagine some people get this image in their head and they kind of see what this vampire student would maybe look like, because we all reflect back on like vampire movies that we may have watched, or just an image that we have of people. But this actually has nothing to do with someone's appearance or image or whatever persona they're portraying. Vampire student is, you might have heard of vampire coworkers or vampire, people in your life, negative people, toxic people in your life. Vampire student is the kind of student that will absolutely drain the energy out of other students. Whether that's always relying, like codependent on other students to always help them with their work, nearly do their work for them. Or maybe they're the type of vampire student that just habitually procrastinates and drags people along with them to procrastinate. Like, oh, don't worry about studying, let's just go do this thing, right? Or you don't have to turn that in tonight, or you have until midnight to turn it in, let's go do this thing. A vampire student essentially would suck the energy out of you. And that's in the classroom as well as outside of the classroom. In the classroom, it could be that student that sits next to you and always relies on you for your notes because they're not taking notes. It could be the student that sits next to you in the classroom and does work from another class, and then when it comes to work for your class, they're tapping into you for those resources. Needing to get work done and asking if they can see your work while they're doing theirs. Oh, I just want to compare yours to mine is something that we heard a lot. Can I take a look at yours so I know how to get started? Or can you help me get started? Or can I take yours and just change some words? Plagiarism. So vampire students will absolutely suck the life out of you. And there are some colleges, one in particular that I taught at, where if you are in class with a group of students, I know this happens in high school as well with like IB programs, where you're in class with a set group of students, the same 12 or 20 students, and you're with them through the whole year, and then, or the whole semester, and then the next semester or the next year rolls around, but because you're on the same education or career track, you're with those same students again, and you travel with those students throughout your education, whether that be high school or college. So you're surrounded by the same people all the time. When this happens and you have a vampire student or two in that circle, it gets very taxing, and it's not often, I didn't say never, right? It's not often there's going to be a student that really stands up for either themselves or the rest of the group and calls that person out. And the reason why it doesn't happen often is because you have to deal with that student for the remainder of your education. So if you call that student out, you're already creating conflict. But what you're not realizing is that they started creating conflict when they started sucking your energy from you. Whether it is high school or it is college, it's important that you understand the value of your education. You are there to learn. Even if it's one of the lamest like gen ed classes that nobody wants to take, especially in college, right? I took English comp for 4 years in high school. Why do I have to take it again in college, right? I get it. Like, I understand. There's definitely a break in the system somewhere when it comes to that stuff. However, right, when you're dealing with these vampire students, it's important that you understand that your education really trumps their opinion. You are there to learn and better yourself and plot your path to success, where they are not necessarily doing so. They are sucking the energy from your path. So for you to stand up for yourself, and you can stand up for yourself in a very polite and genuine manner without hurting anybody's feelings. However, chances are, if that person knows what they're doing, they're going to get offended. It is what it is. You're not there to make them happy. You're there to make yourself happy. So I'm curious, like, drop comments, whether that be on podcast notes. I don't know if you could even do that. I'm new at this stuff. But I know you can do it on YouTube. Drop comments if you have personally experienced any vampire students in your education or work. If you're a parent and you're watching this, can you anonymously drop comments and not name names about maybe a coworker who like just sucks the life energy from you? Sometimes it is somebody, like I mentioned, that's always trying to juice notes from another student or basically have the other student do all the work for them. But it comes in like many different forms as well. It could just be the negative student that happens to sit next to you all the time, or the negative student that's in your group project. They're always like, oh, this sucks. Oh, this is miserable. Why do we have to do this? This is a terrible idea. Why does Professor Hendricks make us do these things? Blah, 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 blah. When they come in all negative like that, they obviously bring down the morale of the group or yourself, again, sucking the life energy from you. So I'd love to know that if you've had any experience like this, and what you did to rectify it. Like, did you have a conversation with that person, that classmate? Did you tell your professor? I would always encourage students to come and talk to me, because I don't mind being the bad guy. I don't mind approaching a student and asking them, getting to the root of the problem, or encouraging them to better themselves, or if it comes down to it, just straight calling them out. So I always try to relieve my students of being the bad guy. Like, I'll take the ownership of that. I'll run with that one. But sometimes you take it upon yourself because, you know, the wick finally burns out. And I'm curious to hear how you handled it. I would always, you know, students come to me and be like, hey, if you want in your group, tell your group that Professor Hendricks said, and then keep it as a general statement. That way that vampire student doesn't feel like they're being pointed at. So we would try that approach with the general, hey, tell your group Mr. Hendricks said this. But then there was the times where I had to get involved. So have you had to talk to a teacher about this, or a professor? Have you had to talk to an employer about a coworker? I'm curious to hear how everybody else maybe has handled vampire students, vampire classmates, or coworkers. Mainly because it's an ongoing life lesson, right? The more we engage and work with people and network with people, we're going to meet those vampires in our lives. And I'll do follow-up videos if I have to, in regards to, you know, how can we work around this. If you have questions in regards to like specific instances and how I handled certain things, you could drop that in the comments below, and then maybe that prompts other videos. I can tell you that after a student would come and talk to me about a vampire student, I would genuinely, my first step would be like, if it's a group assignment, tell the whole group that Professor Hendricks said this. Say, hey, Professor Hendricks pulled me aside and he wanted me to relay this to the whole group. So that way it's on me, right? And then if it didn't rectify the situation, then I would go ahead and take more ownership, and I would pull each group member aside individually as if I was having just a one-on-one meeting with everybody, and then I would address it with the student at hand. But again, that way the student didn't feel like they were being pointed at. I had to talk with everybody, right? I never want anybody to be feeling singled out if we could avoid it. And then if it absolutely didn't work and they were still doing so by the end of the semester, I would pull that student aside and just have a talk with them privately and be way more direct and specific in regards to it. I'm a pretty blunt person. I don't sugarcoat things well, so sometimes it came off a little bit harsh, and I'd be lying if I said nobody cried. But sometimes you want that harsh reality as a student, and not when you're out there in your professional career and you have a hard time keeping a job because you are absolutely unemployable. But again, if you have questions, comments, drop them, and that would help me provide content to you if I'm answering questions, and maybe even just you given the opportunity to share stories. So I would encourage you that if you do engage like that, just leave the names out of people. We want to keep this channel as friendly as possible and just have open conversations and not call or tag people. That's really unnecessary. Let them move on with their lives. You move on with your life, and let's not put people on blast. So keep it anonymous if you're talking about any vampires in your life. I hope you appreciated my short talk on vampire students, and thank you for joining in on A Professor's Take.